Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. I'm Uriel Eisen.
And I'm Devin Bedoni. And this is our practice edition for the week.
And really mixing it up here, you have the quote.
Oh my God.
Again, from Eitan. Thank you, Eitan.
If you cannot do great things, do small things in a great way. Napoleon Hill, whoever that is. I was just saying that this kind of hits home for me, and I was actually having this discussion with several of my friends recently of my generation. I think you're a little younger than me. Anyway, I'm late 30s now.
Yeah.
But I feel like many of us of this generation, the early millennials, grew up with this, like, you can do anything, you're going to change the world, you're going to be amazing, like, go out and knock it out of the park, champ. And I think a lot of us now are finding ourselves in this approaching middle age, like in this period of life, being like, like my example, like I'm trying to run a business, a small business decently. Like, I'm not changing the world. And one of my friends was like, I raise kids. I try and do it good, but I'm just raising kids, And I think there's a lot of in the US especially, just so much like, be exceptional, be incredible, change the world. And sometimes you're just like, you just got to live your life and not be a jerk.
I wouldn't even say sometimes. I would say inherently it has to be a large majority of the time, because otherwise there is no exceptional. Right? Exceptional is relative.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we just are all aspiring to be the next billionaire or whatever. And it's kind of like, that's not sustainable. Bunch of us got to just be.
And I think if everyone is just being and doing a good job at it, there's a lot of room for improvement.
Then we'll have an exceptional world instead of some exceptional people.
Yeah.
In a messed up world.
Potentially.
Yeah.
I think we need to give the means of production back to the people. No. Total joke. No. Anyway.
Kidding, not kidding.
We don't need to get into that here.
We're the people. We're producing things.
That's true. Yeah.
Anyhow.
Give the means of improvement back to the people.
Yeah. We're making a strong effort.
Go to the Gemba.
Yeah. Go to the Gemba. Well, I have some small little things and then some kind of bigger in process continued discussion.
Awesome.
Some little things. Coram walked up to me the other day. We use like avalanche shovels to scoop our chips out of our machines.
Yep.
Just because we happen to both have avalanche shovels, or I had my old avalanche shovel and I'm like, I don't ski anymore. So I grabbed it and brought it to the shop a while ago. And then he's not really using his, and he just brought his in.
Okay.
I'm like working at my computer, and he walks up to me and holds up the avalanche shovel, and he just like peppered it with holes. Because we have this thing, we go to scoop chips, and they're fully saturated still. And if you don't hold them there with the shovel tilted for a while, you get all this coolant.
So that would be the waste of waiting.
Yeah. So now.
Interesting.
The shovel drains the coolant because it's effectively a strainer.
I thought you drilled holes in the bottom of your pails.
We do that as well. But that's just one more. It's better if they just stay in the machine.
Yeah, no, the holes make a lot of sense.
The coolant stays in the machine.
Interesting.
Yeah, so if anybody wants to get buck wild on their shovels today, knock yourselves out. It was helpful. We... ordered fine filter bags for our coolant filtration.
Oh, cool.
So the Freddy vacuum comes with a 10 micron.
Okay.
We were still finding, like, we will filter out, we'll pump into a garbage can usually, and then do the final vacuum, pump that back into the vacuum out of the garbage can and then into the machine. So it's going through the filter twice. We were still finding a lot of, like, kind of like silt size stuff.
Okay.
Like, it was just kind of making it murky, which again, I don't know if you would notice this if you had white coolant. I think because ours is clear, it's easier to see.
Interesting.
Kind of this like very like vague gray haze.
Okay.
But I want to get away from that being a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we ordered some 5-micron bags that don't go in the machine, in the Freddy. But the plan is to, when we pump into the garbage can,
put it in the garbage can.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Run it through that. See how it works.
Yeah.
So
nice.
they just came, Friday.
Okay.
So we'll try them out today.
How's the Freddy?
It's good.
Nice.
Yeah, we were having an issue in the saw, and Ariel and I tag teamed on it, and we did a full clean out of the saw in, I don't know, 20 minutes.
Nice.
And the saw is especially annoying. Like, it has all of this. You have to unbolt all of this, like, drain pan stuff, and then you need one person to hold up the auger, because you can't actually take the auger out because of how the hydraulic hoses are routed.
Gotcha.
Which, as I said that, we should probably just cut that metal that blocks it so that we can take the auger out. But anyway, it's like a task. You got to take a bunch of stuff off. But
nice.
That helped a lot. And then on our meeting whiteboard, we just made a spot to log tool IDs that have bad information.
Oh, very smart.
Yeah.
I think this is something we've talked about this, but basically like designing in systems for how things get fixed.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes it's just this huge lift and there's that's great.
Because I just didn't have it. Like Ariel would be like, is this right? And I'd be like, no. But I'd be in the middle of something else.
Right.
And so I wouldn't have like the bandwidth to switch tasks, go open my tool library, and like make the edit at that moment. Yeah. And she was having to interrupt me, which I think she felt bad about. Mm-hmm. So now whenever a bad tool that's awesome. A likely bad tool ID comes through, she can flag it. Where usually the issue is a stick out that was not correct.
That's awesome. Nice.
And we I mean, we made a space on our playbook. Because Ariel and Corum both kind of brought it up on how to prioritize basically what we were talking about last episode. Okay. How to prioritize their labor when there's a lot of different things to do. Because, right now Ariel does a lot of like admin stuff of like RFQs and shipping, RFQs to vendors and shipping and that kind of communication, and all of our anodizing, shipping and stuff. And she's also doing a lot of setups. And so she's kind of doing the juggle now.
Doing the dance.
Yeah. Yeah. And we had a short discussion on like how we were going to handle that prioritization, and brought up the playbook idea. Uh-huh. And so I just made a place in our Airtable kind of documents tab. Okay. And just named a few, and we're going to start filling them out slowly through discussion, I think. We basically just, right now I'm just thinking we're going to have 3 basically like on the back foot, like
machine priority,
smooth running, and like ahead of schedule. Because I think those are kind of the 3 states we find ourselves in. Maybe we'll break it down differently as things progress. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I bet even just those 3 is going to be like extremely illuminating, to just be like, we are ahead schedule, and then having just a list of things that means you shift your attention to. Yeah. Because as you're sort of like, just hearing you say that, I do feel like that change of mindset is maybe the challenging part. It is. And I think like we were talking about. Because you're like, I'm under the gun for 3 weeks, and then you come out of that and you're like, what do I do now? And like we said at last episode, like when you've spent a lot of time, which I think is common as a small business, orienting around stress as your organizing principle. Right. When you come out of that, often we're very hapless. Yeah. And just kind of like, I don't know what to do. I think I'm going to make coffee. Right. Instead of like, you're probably looking at a dip in sales in 3 weeks unless you kind of start hitting that now. Yeah, exactly. It's not a good thing. Right. Interesting. That's very cool. Yeah. The rest of it's big, so maybe we should hit some of your... Okay, yeah. So more SOPs, just nailing them down. As mentioned last episode, in the process of making them, there was a great insight by Sam, which is basically that if it's hard to make an SOP, it's probably also hard to do the process, or a very knowledge heavy, or very in need of simplification and improvement. Mm-hmm. But just getting those SOPs we've found to be
like we're getting to a point where the processes that don't have SOPs feel like they're in the Stone Age. Like it's just like ambiguous. It's really, I don't know. It's cool. It's cool.
Those processes are naked and afraid.
Yeah. No, it's and like, yeah, it's the biggest thing is not even at the moment. We don't lean on the SOPs very heavily because it is a small shop, not a ton of things to do, but just having it there means like you were sort of saying about your bad tool ID, just a place to modify it. If there is something that needs to be changed, it's really easy to just write it on the SOP with a Sharpie or something. Yeah. And then it's logged, it's captured. Yeah. And it's cool. It's very interesting. It feels like busy work and just like another thing to do, which it sort of obviously is another thing to do, and it's a big lift. Yeah. But it's been really helpful. Yeah. I have kind of a silly one, but when you're buying pasta, I started buying shapes that are easy to drain with the lid. Anyway, so that's just a little something to think about. I mean, it is interesting in like just the bigger picture of like thinking about the whole process. Yeah. At every stage. I mean, we keep coming back to the kitchen as a very relatable production process that everyone does for the most part, and is not, I would say, is not very thoroughly examined. I mean, we were sort of having the conversation of what do people naturally optimize for, and I think it depends on the person. But anyway, if you don't have a strong preference for pasta shape for a particular dish, you can pick one that just drains really easily with the lid instead of having to dirty a colander or like sit there waiting and trying to keep the noodles from slipping out.
So is it, in your experience, is it small shapes primarily, not like long like spaghetti style?
Yeah, the spaghetti's shapes? The worst for sure, but the corkscrews are quite good. I think they drain in any orientation. I forget what they're called. You know what I'm talking about. This is a more production related improvement. So we've broken 2 roughing mills in the past week because your saw so you guys cut our stock and it leaves that little like burr. Yeah. And in one of our lesson learned, but in one of our parts we rest it up on the cut end, which was a mistake from a
design engineering standpoint.
Yeah, but it's been like that for a long time, and it is working. And I was kind of trying to figure out a good way to remove that burr, and then I was thinking, like, could we get you guys to cut it on the other side so that the burrs, but like the clamp, it would be unstable. So anyway, like to put the burr on the longer edge instead of the shorter edge, but it would mean stacking the bars in the saw the wrong way. Yeah. And then I just realized I could just mill into the top of the soft jaws so that there's clearance for all burrs. So that's what I did. I just added a little slot where the burr lands, and so now if there is a burr, it just won't push the part up. Yeah. I did have a moment of hesitation, which we'll see if it was warranted, where I was like, I am making a change on the fly to a production tool. Yeah. Yep. TBD. I just made the mod yesterday, so we'll see if it messes anything up. There's a chance it does, which would be a bummer, but I couldn't think. Anyway, we'll see.
In our spindle gripper processes, we've had a similar but different issue when we've been using Mighty Bite Talon grips for Op1. Yep. And sometimes, like, because of the way our hole pattern is spaced in our jaws, sometimes we'll have 2 on either side, and they'll end up like right at the end of the part. Yep. And that fin will sit, like it'll drop, and the fin will sit on top of the Mighty Bite and not allow the part to fall. And so we've had, whenever we're doing those processes, we have to remove that. Yeah. Or align it so that it is in a different direction. Right. But usually we just go ahead and remove it. But you have a lot of parts. It'd be a pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
You pre-tumble it, maybe? I wonder if that would knock it off.
It's all right. That's where I was going with this. I was like, could I add a brush? Could I pick up the part in the spindle gripper and take it over to some operation? Yeah. On and on. Then I was like, I think I could just
like that. Clearance. The other option is to just always put it up. But that's one thing it's for just the operator to do.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's hard, like, you're loading 40 parts in this tray, and it's like, it definitely adds time to have to inspect every single one.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially because it doesn't reliably have it.
Mm-hmm.
So just checking to make sure it's on top wouldn't be sufficient, right? Because sometimes it's on neither end. So that's good. Another silly life SOP improvement is when you want to change your sheets, if you strip the bed in the morning, wash them, dry them when you get home, put them back on the bed, you don't have to fold them. So that's all.
We need to have a third weekly episode that's just life hacks from Uriel.
So there's a very funny YouTube video of someone applying lean to their life.
Uh-huh.
They're not joking about it.
Yeah.
And it is
very
efficient. Yeah.
My wife was like, if you want to lean out our home life is a little chaotic sometimes.
Yeah.
We live in a tiny house with a toddler and both busy, etc. It gets a little crazy in there. And she's like, if you want to lean out our life, like be my guest. And I was like, I don't think you'd actually want that. Also, it requires buy-in.
Yeah. No, there are some little things that are nice to do, and I think a lot of it, like in the factory, same thing. I think it can feel like you're sort of losing your humanity.
Yeah.
Right.
There's small things I want to do for mostly for grocery reordering, things that are easy to be like,
totally.
This is a spot we put empty spice bags.
Yeah.
So that we know, and we just take it with us and then we refill it instead of being like, what's adding it to a list and making a new.
Right.
Anyway, I'm curious about your designated area to start a pen. Is that what's a pen?
Oh, yes.
Like a work in progress pen or a finished?
No. So there's a pen we use to write a little note to each customer. Oh. And sometimes it runs out.
Gotcha.
Not runs out. You know, when you have to start a pen, it's not writing well, so you need something to scribble on.
Uh-huh.
So I saw Sam added a designated scribbling page that is taped down to the desk. And I was like, that's awesome. Yeah. Noticing those little things that are annoying.
Yeah.
And recurring.
Yeah.
So anyway.
That's one. Not sexy, but pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Well, I was going to jump into my ongoing job board organization a little bit. You and I had a couple phone conversations during the week about kind of what to optimize for. I think I have a pretty clear idea of what I want to do now.
And so just as a little refresher, basically it is attempting to schedule jobs on machines or Kanban activities around the shop.
It's attempting to Kanban our processes that we do in the shop based on time duration.
Or really just generally, and your current thought is that time is the
just
unit.
Generally, yes. But okay. I think time's going to be the unit.
Okay.
And I think so. We had talked a little bit about the ability to see when changeovers are going to overlap.
Mm-hmm.
And I think getting to that level of granularity is going to be a little difficult.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to avoid that for now.
Yeah.
Coming back to kind of Kanban principles themselves, regardless of application, seems like one of the beauties of it to me is that you don't have to have any visibility into the internals of a unit, if that makes sense.
Not quite.
The whole concept being that when a thing triggers, that's the unit of information is a triggered unit.
Mm-hmm.
Having granularity for how many are in your bin is not important.
Right, because you've done the work ahead of time to figure out how to structure your Kanban.
Yeah, and so when I was looking at trying to see when setups were going to overlap and stuff, that would require updating on a half-day basis, where things are in progress within that unit. And I was kind of I don't think, I don't think we're quite to that level yet.
Yeah.
And B, it's just not going to happen. We're going to forget and it's going to be bad information.
Right.
So kind of what I'm coming back towards is don't require that there be any visibility aside from triggered versus not triggered.
Uh-huh. That makes sense.
Which I'm kind of excited about. One thing I am sort of my guiding principle, I think, in this is or a large goal is going to be to try and shorten our stock ordered to part delivered window.
Oh, interesting. Because of cash flow?
Because of cash flow. Yeah.
Okay.
So we end up with a lot of material tied up or money tied up in uncut material as safety, because we want to make sure we have flexibility to work on whatever we need to.
Okay.
And so I think, generally speaking, we have a maximum 7-day, assuming things are in stock, 7-day lead time.
Right.
So I want to lay it out so that
sometimes it's more, because if you order on delivery's Tuesday.
Yeah.
Oh, but that's only for sauce cut stuff. Never mind.
Oh, yeah.
There's a few days lead time.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
I want to lay it out so that in the Kanban layout, from on the machine back to ordering stock is at least 7 days.
Okay.
So that a job that lands from the general queue into the it's kind of a work in progress board.
Right.
As well. Work in progress. Both.
Yeah.
When it lands on that board, we can make sure we have material in time so that by the time it's gone through the subsequent steps, the material's here and ready to saw.
Right.
So I think that will be, if we can kind of nail this, I think that's going to be a huge benefit.
Interesting.
And then one thing I did was I ordered I was trying to figure out how we're going to carry this information in our little 1x4 job tags. There's just not enough physical space.
Okay.
So I think we're going to make a 4x6 probably, just use shipping labels that have they'll basically have a pre-printed checklist, I think, for all of our potential processes that we do in the shop.
Yeah.
And there will be a needs column and a done column. And so when we populate a job to the board, we will check off the needs. And then as it moves through the process, we'll check off the done. And those are going to be things that are non-dependent. Or things that you need visibility into prior, that the Kanban process is not gonna generate. So things like sending an RFQ for post-processing.
Okay.
That can happen anywhere in a certain stage of the process. It doesn't have to be its own Kanban
Gotcha.
thing. And there's other things that are like that.
So you're Kanbaning things that take time, kind of.
Basically, yeah. And that are dependent processes.
What do you mean dependent?
You have to program a part before, and you have to saw a part before you can machine a part.
But you also have to get an RFQ before shipping.
Yes, exactly.
But that's not Kanban.
That will be, I think, there will be kind of a cutoff line, I think, where all these things have to be done prior to.
Yeah.
So that's my rough thinking at the moment.
Okay.
And then one thing that I was kind of excited about is I was trying to figure out just how to organize all this stuff, physically.
That was going to be my next question. Yeah.
Because we're going to have this 4x6 label, and then we're going to have a bunch of these little 1x4 labels that we can use to put on trays and stock and all that jazz. So I just ordered some magnetic, paper, not paper clips, but alligator clips. Not alligator clips. Those are electrical tools. But you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah. Like a binder clip with a magnet on it. So it sticks to the fridge or CNC.
And I got colored ones.
Oh, like where this is going. Yeah.
And my thinking is that I'm going to organize color by due date.
Okay.
And that we'll have basically 4 weeks of color sequencing, and it'll just be a week grouping.
Okay.
So we'll just at the top of the board have
this week
whatever green, blue, yellow, red, or whatever. And this week is green, this week is, and then we can just kind of cycle them through from front to back. And that way we can get a really clear visibility into if something is seriously behind schedule in a 4 week, have a 4 week head start onto if something is going to be late.
Okay. I guess what I'm not understanding is the time element. How does this get triggered? Where do the Kanbans go? Because it seems like the time element is irrelevant unless your Kanban triggers production that lasts for weeks. So maybe it does last for weeks.
Well, no. So the way I'm thinking about it right now is that each job traveler, so the Kanbans are not going to be actual cards, right? They're just going to be spaces.
Spaces on the board?
Spaces on the board.
Okay.
And the concept I'm working with right now is that each job traveler will have a number on it between 1 and 6.
Okay.
What I'm going for is 3 days buffer.
Okay.
In any process. We'll have a number between 1 and 6 that will equal the number of half days it can run.
Okay.
Or it's expected to run. And that each Kanban category on the board will require a total of 6 units to be in its thing to be full.
Okay, but you probably don't care about all of them, right? Like sawing stock, it's like if the saw is idle, that's fine.
Yes, but it's going to be based around the machine runtime.
Got it. Okay.
Because that's kind of like that's our main value add, and that's I hesitate to say it's our bottleneck, but in the sense that everything we make goes through those, it is our bottleneck.
Yeah.
So I'm going to group it by that to say that the shop as a whole has...
The cadence is driven by how long it will take to machine.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so like I'm going to say, and I figure if there's like a large 1 through 6 number, we're decently good at doing like simple arithmetic, simple addition in our heads. We can look at a column and say, oh, there's a 3, a 2, but there's not a 1. That one's it's only full to 5. It needs to be full to 6.
I'm not quite picturing the system. Would it be useful to walk through, like, so if you get an order for 1,000 parts,
yeah,
what happens?
It's still a 6.
No, sorry. So you get an order, you print out a few Kanbans because it's a few 6s, or
I think we would still print out 1.
So you'd print out 1 4x6 thing that hangs on the board.
Yes.
That tells you which things need to happen.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we are going to need, I think, to have sort of for the due date part and the color coding, sort of an irrelevant category for things that don't fit within like a 6-week run job that's not going to fit within that 4-week window. That's going to be kind of like this is an edge case.
Right.
Don't use this in the normal system.
Okay.
If that's where you were going with that?
No, I guess so. It seems like when we originally started talking about it, this was sort of a question of solving for where to put your time, right? It's like, do I need to be programming now? Do I need to be doing sales? Excuse me. And so the idea is that you put all these things on the board, you can see which processes sort of have a queue.
Yes.
And right now you can't see that?
Not easily. No.
Because right now it doesn't tell you in what order things hit a particular station?
Yeah. Right now you can see sort of the status of each individual part number. But it's hard to compare across part numbers. And it's hard to compare across maybe more importantly, it's hard to compare across workstations what all is set up for that workstation because there's a lot of noise.
Got it. So how does this solve that? On your board, each horizontal line is a step.
I was imagining it vertically, but
okay.
Yeah.
So every vertical line is a step in the process. You're working left to right.
Mm-hmm. So initially we'll have a first step that's like order material, for example. So maybe we should start at the right side. Like shipping, for example, empties out. We know that we need to pull something from, or let's see, let's not start at shipping because that's sort of a push scenario. Let's start at machining.
Okay.
So let's say machining has 6 half days on a workstation. And then one of those completes. So we slide the whole traveler from from the machining to the next, which we'll
Yep.
say is tumbling.
Okay.
So now we see that there's only a total of, say, 3 in that workstation. We know that it's not at the buffer that we want to have.
So you'd pull apart from programming in, and then programming suddenly doesn't have 3 days of buffer?
I think at that point we're going to have a queue, basically. It's not going to get pulled in until it gets set up, but we'll probably have a buffer between programming and machine run or something.
Of parts that are ready to be set up. Yeah.
So yeah, you probably would pull in the next, I'm going to think through the details of this a little bit, but on the machine at any one time, there's only going to be one.
Yep.
So yes, you would pull from the buffer queue onto the machine.
Yep.
Then that buffer queue lowers. So then you see that you need to pull from programming. So that lowers.
And then you see you need to do some programming.
And then it flows back until at some point stock ordering is empty, and you pull new jobs in from your general queue into stock ordering.
Gotcha.
It breaks down a little bit for multi-process parts that go from one machine to the next.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think maybe we'll just make some placeholders or print a second traveler.
Solve that problem, and then maybe...
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. That sounds... So I think... So that will solve basically being able to see where to put your time would be the goal. To not have a day where you're like, oh, wow, we don't have enough stuff programmed for that, or something like that.
Yeah, I think it also, like, assuming our estimates are decent, I was thinking that we would make little, like, pre-staging bins based on our week color due date things.
Okay.
And it should be fairly quick to do a little add up of everything that's in that bin and see if we're overscheduled.
I'm not sure what that means.
So, like, let's say we assume we have on a workstation, let's say 30 hours of actual runtime available.
Yeah.
Apparently it's more like 20 based on last episode's calculations.
Right.
But let's say it's 30 hours for conversation's sake, and we can look at everything that's in that bin and add up the numbers and say, this is more than that.
Okay.
We're overscheduled for this week. We need to see what we can do to reshuffle things before it's even arrived on the work in progress board.
Gotcha. I see.
And we can also see, okay, right now we're working on color green. This stuff goes back to we're only on color green, and looking in our bins, we have a bunch of stuff for whatever the next color that's not going to make it there in time. We're going to be late on those. We got to figure out how to deal with that or something.
Interesting.
I haven't fully thought through all of that yet, but I think there's a rough architecture that's going to allow us to get closer. Thoughts?
That's cool.
It's a little hard without seeing it.
Yeah, a little hard without seeing it. I think it's sort of a Kanban system, but centralized on one board.
Yeah,
right?
As we were talking through this, I'm realizing that probably the because there's not multiple bins and there's not any actual cards, we probably need to have a full and a trigger, 2 different levels in each buffer, basically, to say, like, okay, you fill it till you get to a 6.
Yeah.
And then once it hits a 3, you start to fill it again. You want to have a minimum buffer of a day and a half for each category or process.
Right.
But if you just like are always like playing whack-a-mole on every one that's down from 6, that could get a little bit confusing. So there probably needs to be like
It could be. That said, the closer it is to that ratio, right? For every part you program, you run a job. So actually, you're sort of talking by changing those triggers, you will end up increasing your batch sizes of like programming, right? So now you have to do a bunch of programming, which maybe is beneficial. And I think to your point about playing whack-a-mole, is doing like 1 million task changes a day, and by 1 million I mean like 6 instead of 2.
Right.
Just is sometimes a lot less effective. So maybe that is better to have those at different levels. I think I mean, this is a total guess. I think it would be useful to have pretty good visibility into your bin. So at a glance, even if it hasn't hit a trigger,
yeah,
you could know which thing needs topping off if it's convenient, kind of.
So maybe try and even do like a double column for each process or something that's like.
What does the double column do?
For the trigger point. So you can like very clearly see when the trigger point is empty.
Yeah, something. I'm wondering if there's a clever, I can't think of one, but I would guess that there's some like complex board game that has come up with a very clever system of showing different like cue. Like, because each Kanban is going to have a number on it that refers to half days.
Yep.
That is a lot of, like, to get any information out of that, you sort of have to stand there and add them all up.
Sure.
Right. And so I wonder if there's a way to print like a bar on the side that makes them stack appropriately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought about that. It's hard when
it starts covering up information.
A bar on the side of the traveler?
Maybe. And so if you just, when you stick it up on the board, you always line up those bars. So like a short job would only show like a small sliver, but then you can't read the traveler.
I know, that's what I was coming. I was like, we need to have this unified thing, for like ease of printing them.
Yeah.
And having a template and all that. But we also need to show visually somehow change in duration.
What would happen? This is kind of weird. What would happen if you displayed the cards cascading down the board at a diagonal such that their left to right position reflected like a Gantt chart, right? A Gantt chart cascades.
We're coming back to people have done this before.
Well, yeah, but like arranging your board such that you can essentially build a Gantt chart. So your left to right position tells you how long it's going to last relative to the one above it, kind of, or relative to the board.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, it starts. Yeah, skip that. I guess that seems like the challenge, maybe, is that I think it's going to probably, I mean, it seems like a great next step.
Yeah.
It seems like it may not be visual enough yet, but I can't think of how to make it visual.
What I was thinking, like, and if we did the double column per process, where one was like, basically be like, let's say we want to have 6 half days per process.
Yeah.
But it triggers at 3. We basically have the right column be 3 and the left column be 3.
Okay.
And it's pretty easy to do the mental math for one workstation.
Right.
And one group for if that equals 3.
Uh-huh.
And then if it doesn't, like, you just move from the left until it equals 3. And then it's easy to see, okay, we have an empty or a partially empty column.
Right.
Well, I mean, it doesn't actually trigger until it's empty. Right. So you don't give it any attention until there's nothing there. So I don't know. I was thinking about breaking the mental math into little chunks.
Yeah. I suppose depending on how you're using it, you could maybe just have magnetic little coins or little, like, they look like a little pawn, right?
Yeah.
Of the number of dots in that bin. And then when you grab a traveler, you could just pull those.
Oh.
Or something. So that would start to be a visual token.
So you do the math once.
On an ongoing basis, you could see the sum.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, it seems like there's going to be a million solutions and you'll know what the best one is.
Right. No, it's good to think through those. That's like adds a process to updating it, but it also adds a lot of visibility. So it might be might be worth it.
I don't know. Yeah, hard to say. Interesting.
It is definitely making me think if like we can eventually move this back to digital.
Right.
But I really do. I'm feeling 100% good about working this all out in the physical instead of trying to build it from scratch in digital off the bat. Because we're already through like a couple iterations and this is going to be a big whole different iteration.
With minimal cost of like developing the system.
Yeah.
You don't have to program it. It's just
and like to figure out what our template is for like what information is on that traveler.
Yeah.
Like I think I'm just gonna I mean, maybe I'll print out some things because it'll probably be faster than handwriting out a bunch of note cards to test with. But I think we're just going to make like 20 or something and do the next 20 jobs with a template and be like, okay, what information is missing here? What do we need to add?
Very cool.
Yeah.
Maybe we should make a little video put it up on Instagram so people can see what we're talking about. If
that means I have to actually make it.
Yeah, at some point.
No, it's on the list it was on the list for last week, but then we had a couple very challenging days, which we talked on the phone. I mentioned it was actually pretty cool. In the moment, I was like, "Oh my God, like what the heck?" And then that evening, looking back, I was kind of like, you know what? This was unusually like there was a few things we probably could have done preemptively to help. Mm-hmm. But it was some stuff out of our control. And looking back on it at the end of the day, I was like, that doesn't happen very often anymore, which is a big, huge step.
Yeah.
I feel like that was more my MO for a lot of years.
That's your standard operating procedure.
Yeah. Run around with your hair on fire. And these days things run fairly smooth. And then secondarily, we still kept 2 machines running the whole day and set up another one by the end of the day. And I was kind of
nice.
Like, actually, this was a pretty successful day. It just felt a little chaotic.
Interesting.
It was, the issue was we had a bunch of stock did I mention this already? That was warped.
Oh, you did mention the warp stuff.
So we got this big order of stock and we started discovering in process that a significant portion of it was warped. I contacted the supplier and they were like, that's within the spec we guarantee. We're holding it with vacuum, so it needs to be pretty flat to hold it. And so we had just started setting aside the warped pieces.
Yeah.
And we talked about how we were going to bend it back. And then it finally got to the point where we were through all of the good material.
I see.
And I was like, so what's the status on that? And Corin was like, well, all the ideas we had for bending it back didn't work. And I was like,
brutal.
Oh, okay.
So how would your Kanban system fix that? Would you just move some of that stock to non-available or something? Could you surface that problem on this new system?
I don't know. I'd have to think through it more. I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wonder if it would be worth having like I wonder if it'd be worth having some color. Like you start adding stars to your current board.
Yeah.
That is sort of like, hey, there's a problem that needs to get resolved. And you could sort of put it spatially in your process to see like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's worth thinking about.
Or like, could you write a date on a little gold star for like a thing that needs to be resolved by a certain date, but then you're sort of doing some, I don't know.
I think what I'm trying to tackle now is like our 80% of our job flow and getting that to work really well.
That makes sense.
And once we get there, hopefully, knock on wood, then we can start attacking kind of these special use cases.
Yeah.
And also like theoretically, if the 80% is going really well, we're going to have a fair amount of bandwidth to figure out how to handle these edge cases.
I feel like Pareto is on your side here of 80-20, 80% of the results for 20% of the effort. So I feel like digging into all those edge cases and trying to solve them off the bat would be a waste of time because they probably won't work anyway. Right. It's all probably going to be like, okay, what we learned is these things and we'll modify it in these ways.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, that day was all of a sudden one of our employees was busy at someone else's shop for a significant portion of 2 days flattening stock. And
the machine was idle.
The machine was idle. What did we do? The other thing was like a somewhat emergency chip run. We were doing some big hog out parts, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, this is today that we have to take, or this is not tomorrow. This is today. We actually knew it the day before. We were planning on it, and it had to happen that day. We were not planning on the stock flattening issue being an out of the shop situation. So what ended up happening is they both were gone, and I ran the shop for the rest of the day.
I see.
Forgot a meeting and stood someone up.
Damn.
But the machines kept going, so that was cool.
Nice.
Yeah. Felt like a little rambly there, but anyhow. Any other things we wanted to tackle for today?
I did have a thought on your chips, and hearing you say that, it occurred to me, this probably wouldn't make sense, but I wonder if, well, firstly, that you could Kanban your chip runs, so you knew when it was I don't know. This whole thing sort of comes back to like where things need to be in time.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to make that happen without very good information.
Yeah.
And confidence in that information.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's probably not worth it. But I guess the other thing I was just thinking is it's wasteful to scoop the chips from the CNC into a bucket, into a trash can that then gets brought over to the other, like you have Gaylords, right?
They're IBC totes.
Okay. They then dump the chips into. So that's another transfer. Would it work to just have more trash cans that take up the same space and get rid of the Gaylords?
They don't take up the same space. They take up way more space.
Way more space, yeah.
Yeah.
Damn.
That's the issue.
Yeah. Makes sense.
I did something more like that for a long time. There's a lot of aspects about the IBC totes that are like they're hard to handle without a forklift.
Right.
But their space saving is pretty significant.
Yeah.
You can carry them in a truck. They're very well optimized for a truck size. You can get 2 in the back of a full size pickup.
Yeah. And
that is usually around 2,000 pounds of material that we can haul in one go.
Gotcha.
So it it makes pretty good use of that human time as well, because at least we're making some amount of money on the scrap run. I don't love our system. It's a symptom of being on private property back in the woods. Like eventually I just want to have a dumpster that they come and get. Like,
yes, I hate my current system.
Yeah. But I do think, well, there's 2 benefits to the double transfer. One is that they drain.
Yeah.
So I think that helps a lot with like coolant reclamation, but more importantly, just not sending coolant to the scrapyard, which they find very annoying for good reason. Mm-hmm. And then just being handling amounts that are easy to handle as a person. And
definitely that's what I was thinking. If you kept them in trash bins, it would be a lighter weight thing to move. But
trash bin, they're expensive. I mean, not that should be the limiting factor, but like a good brute trash can is not cheap these days.
In this economy.
Yeah. We are doing our titanium chips in trash cans to keep them separated.
Yeah.
And then the last few weeks we've been mostly running aluminum. So we've been keeping our steel and stainless chips in trash cans and just filling the IBC totes with aluminum. Because we get like 3 times the price for straight aluminum.
Oh, nice. Then mixed.
Which ends up, it adds up.
Yeah.
We, not really. It doesn't really add up, but we buy a lot of snacks for the shop with the money. So anyway, I don't love the system, but I think it's decent for the moment.
Totally.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's it for this episode. Thanks all for tuning in. You can find us at Incremental CI on Instagram. Please continue tagging us in your improvements. It's fun to share. A bunch of you have been messaging us, which is always fun to hear insights. A lot of people have a lot of very cool experience.
Yeah.
So at Toyota, at other companies, implementing a lot of these ideas in much bigger companies, or just different companies. Always fun to hear. So really appreciate you guys reaching out. You can find me at austere_manufacturing, also on Instagram.
You can find me at Lychen, LICHEN _MFG on Instagram.
And I think that's the show for the week.
We'll talk to y'all soon.